Here's the brutal truth nobody tells you. Most people don't waste their lives in one dramatic collapse. They bleed them out in 1,000 small drips. Hours lost in shallow chatter, years drained by jobs they despise, decades swallowed whole by chasing approval that never fills the void. Aristotle called the goal of life eudaimonia, human flourishing. But what most of us end up with is the parody version. Endless busyness mistaken for meaning, consumption sold as fulfillment, and pleasure as purpose. You think you're building a life, but really, you're just decorating your cage. And here's the part that hurts. Wasting your life doesn't feel like wasting it when you're in the middle of it. It feels normal. It feels like what everyone else is doing. You check your phone 150 times a day. You show up to obligations that exhaust you. You measure your worth in likes, promotions, and fake smiles. You never stop to ask, is this mine or just borrowed from the crowd? Freud would say your superego, the internalized voice of parents, teachers, society, keeps you obedient to scripts you never wrote. Nietzsche would spit on that obedience and call it herd morality. And if you think you're immune, remember, the crowd is seductive precisely because it numbs you from the terror of solitude. But solitude, that's where the dangerous secret lies. The studies in 2025 are proving what philosophers intuited centuries ago. Solitude isn't a curse for the intelligent, it's their fuel. It sharpens thought, ignites creativity, and protects the soul from dilution. Yet almost nobody goes there, because the silence reveals the truth you've been running from. You don't know who you are without the noise. And that's the cliff edge we're standing on. Keep drifting with the herd, or step into the terrifying, liberating abyss of being alone with yourself. Because in that abyss lies the key. Why do the sharpest minds lean towards solitude while everyone else drowns in noise? Because solitude isn't emptiness, it's concentration without distraction. In 2025, new neuro research from Cambridge and Tokyo showed that individuals with higher IQ and creative output reported thriving in solitude, with creative productivity spiking nearly 30% when freed from constant social interruptions. Think about that. A third more genius unlocked simply by refusing the chatter. That's the same edge Bill Gates calls his think weeks. He disappears, reads, writes, thinks, alone, no noise, and he's not unique. Every visionary worth remembering has understood. The crowd dilutes, solitude distills. But society sells the opposite. The more friends, the happier you are. Pure happiness scam. Data from 2025 paints a different picture. The majority of high-functioning problem solvers and innovators reported less socializing, correlated with higher life satisfaction, so long as it was chosen, not forced. The difference between loneliness and solitude is agency. Solitude chosen is sanctuary, loneliness imposed is hell. Sartre called it bad faith when we hide in crowds to escape freedom. When you're surrounded by people but hollow inside, that's not connection, that's camouflage. Here's the shocking part. The very thing people fear, being alone, may be the most direct path to clarity. Freud warned that repression leads to neurosis. Jung insisted that only in silence do we meet the shadow. In solitude, you face yourself without the masks. That's terrifying, but also the only place where self-overcoming begins. Nietzsche's call wasn't to blend into the herd, it was to stand apart, to become more than you were yesterday. And that doesn't happen in a bar full of small talk or in a group chat spamming memes. Crowds make you predictable, solitude makes you dangerous. And in a world where everyone's broadcasting noise, the one who can sit quietly and think deeply owns the sharpest weapon of all, focus. But the irony? Most people don't lose their lives in crowds, they lose them in the glowing trap in their hand. The biggest thief of all isn't people, it's pixels. And that's where the waste accelerates. Here's the greatest scam of the 21st century. Social media sold you connection, but what it delivered was addiction. In 2025, the numbers are staggering. Teens are logging an average of 5 hours a day scrolling feeds, and 41% report severe mental health struggles tied directly to that habit. That's not leisure, that's servitude. Kahneman's research on cognitive traps explains why. Our brains chase the quick hit of novelty and validation, but every scroll is a slot machine pull rigged to keep you hooked. You think you're choosing, you're being chosen. And it's not just teens. Adults, even the smartest ones, hemorrhage hours on this endless scroll. Productivity tanks, creativity shrivels. Neuroimaging studies in 2025 confirm what you already feel in your gut. Heavy social media use rewires the brain's reward pathways, blunting motivation and spiking anxiety. You're not keeping up, you're being drained. Freud might call it sublimated desire hijacked into pixels. Jung would say the archetypal need for meaning has been outsourced to algorithms that profit from your emptiness. Here's the sinister part. All those connections are an illusion. 87% of Gen Z admitted in 2025 surveys that social media makes their lives worse, not better. 87%. And yet they keep scrolling, because leaving feels like cutting the cord to the world. That's Sartre's trap of bad faith again. You know it's destroying you, but you pretend it's freedom. The cost? A decade gone before you notice. A decade spent curating a digital self instead of becoming a real one. And on your deathbed, Daniel Pink's massive survey of 26,000 regrets shows you won't remember a single like. You'll remember the relationships you didn't deepen, the risks you didn't take, the life you didn't live. And here's the cliffhanger. Social media isn't even the deepest poison. The deeper trap is subtler, quieter, and far more lethal: conformity. The slow poison that kills not your time, but your soul. Conformity doesn't kill in one stroke. It seeps in like carbon monoxide, invisible until you're already choking. You laugh when they laugh. You nod when they nod. You accept the script handed down by parents, bosses, politicians, influencers, until one day you realize you've been living someone else's life. Kierkegaard called it, "The crowd is untruth." He wasn't being poetic. He meant that surrendering to the herd erases your authentic self, and what's left is a hollow shell repeating the same phrases, chasing the same hollow dreams. The 2025 midlife studies are brutal here. A majority of people in their 40s and 50s reported their deepest regret wasn't money lost or jobs missed, but lives unlived because they bent themselves to fit in. Acceptance came later, too late, when the chance to risk, to rebel, to chase what burned inside was already gone. Sartre would call that bad faith in its purest form, the refusal to embrace the terror of freedom, choosing instead to hide behind the safety of what everyone does. And make no mistake, society rewards conformity, the obedient worker, the agreeable citizen, the curated Instagram clone. But those rewards rot fast. A promotion in a job you hate, applause for beliefs you don't hold, friendships that evaporate when you stop playing along. Nietzsche warned that herd morality makes you docile, a last man satisfied with comfort, incapable of greatness. What looks like stability is actually decay. The shocking twist? Even neuroscience backs this up. In 2025, brain imaging studies showed chronic conformity suppresses activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the very region tied to decision-making and creativity. Translation: follow the herd long enough, and you literally weaken the parts of your brain that make you you. And that's why conformity is more dangerous than social media. Social media steals hours. Conformity steals identity. But there's another thief lurking in the shadows, just as destructive. Procrastination, the silent art of killing tomorrow before it even arrives. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's self-betrayal. Jung would call it the shadow at work, the parts of you refuse to face, sabotaging you in silence. You delay not because you don't care, but because you're terrified of what it means if you actually try. If you write that book and it fails, if you start that business and it collapses, if you confess that love and they turn away, better to stall, better to drown in distractions than confront the risk of living. That's the psychological trick. Procrastination feels safe, but it's the slowest way to waste a life. The numbers are vicious. A 2025 meta-analysis across 22 countries found chronic procrastinators suffered 63% higher rates of stress-related illness, and their life satisfaction cratered compared to peers who took decisive action. That's not a quirk, it's a death spiral. Seligman's research into learned helplessness explains why. Every delay teaches your brain you're powerless, until even small actions feel impossible. And the longer you wait, the heavier the weight becomes, until opportunity is a door rusted shut. Freud might say procrastination is your death drive, an unconscious pull toward decay. Kierkegaard would call it despair, not doing the wrong thing but refusing to do anything. And when years slip by, you wake up in the exact nightmare Daniel Pink uncovered in his 2025 survey. People don't regret failures nearly as much as inactions. The top deathbed regret isn't "I tried and lost," it's "I never tried at all." But here's the killer twist. Procrastination disguises itself as busyness. Emails answered, chores checked, hours spent. Productivity theater masking existential cowardice. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time, but the right time never comes. Aristotle warned that virtue is practice. You become what you repeatedly do. Delay long enough and you don't just waste time, you become the kind of person who wastes time. And while procrastination is poison, what makes it lethal is when it gets married to the biggest fraud of modern life: meaningless work and hollow success. That's where the soul goes to die. Here's the dirtiest secret of our culture. Success, the way it's sold to you, is a coffin lined with gold. Work your decades, climb the ladder, grab the house, the car, the status, and then realize you've been running on someone else's treadmill. Nietzsche saw it coming a century ago when he ripped apart slave morality. The idea that people accept values handed down by authority instead of creating their own. Today's slave morality is the gospel of hustle, the grind that worships achievement while starving joy. And the science now backs up what the philosophers screamed. In 2025, Columbia's psychology department released findings overturning the myth that achievement breeds happiness. They proved the reverse. Happiness precedes achievement. People who cultivate meaning, gratitude, and authentic connections first are more likely to achieve sustainably. Yet society still pushes the lie. Get the job, then you'll feel whole. Earn the title, then you'll feel worthy. But it never comes. Ask the burned-out executives, the lawyers who make six figures, but lie awake hollow. Their lives are trophies that collect dust. Freud would say they've sacrificed instinctual freedom for social approval. Jung would argue they're trapped in the collective persona, the mask society wants them to wear, while the authentic self withers. Aristotle's vision of eudaimonia, true flourishing, gets mutilated into productivity metrics and profit margins. And Kierkegaard, he'd say they're living in despair, unaware, too afraid to face the terrifying leap into meaning. The evidence is ugly. Surveys in 2025 show nearly 70% of professionals admit their work feels meaningless. 70%. Entire careers spent polishing a facade. The saddest part is that many realize it only after sacrificing health, relationships, and time, the real currency of existence. And here's the dagger. The pursuit of hollow success doesn't just waste your life, it anesthetizes you so you don't notice it happening. It makes you ignore the signals, those whispers from your body and mind that scream you're running off track. Ignore those whispers long enough, and they don't whisper anymore. They collapse you. Here's how people implode, not with one bad choice, but with years of silenced alarms. The headaches you ignore, the chest tightness you brush off, the creeping burnout you joke about. Aristotle said the good life isn't just about virtue of the soul, it's balance of body and mind. Yet in 2025, the American Heart Association confirmed that chronic loneliness increases risk of cardiovascular disease by over 50%. Not solitude, the chosen kind, sharpens you, but enforced loneliness, the disconnected kind, corrodes you from the inside out. And the tragedy? Most can't even tell the difference. They confuse fake crowds for connection, and then wonder why they feel emptier after parties, after endless networking. Loneliness isn't measured in how many people surround you, it's measured in whether you can stand yourself when the noise stops. Freud warned that repressing those signals leads to neurosis. Jung saw illness as the psyche's last attempt to force your attention inward. Kierkegaard described despair as sickness unto death, the slow rot of ignoring your deepest self. And every skipped doctor's visit, every "I'll sleep when I'm dead" mantra, every numbed night scrolling your phone is proof you're bargaining with that sickness. The stats cut deep. In 2025, workplace stress accounted for nearly 80% of doctor visits in the US, 8 out of 10. That's not health, that's systemic self-destruction. And here's the kicker, even the brain pays. Chronic stress shrinks the hippocampus, the seat of memory and learning. Translation: you're trading sharpness for survival. You're burning the candle at both ends and calling the smoke ambition. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what if you erase the why by ignoring your body's warning signs? Then the how crushes you. And the collapse isn't just physical, it's existential. Because when you finally crack, you realize you spent your life tuned to the wrong signals. But collapse doesn't have to be the end. It can be the trigger. Because just as psychology and philosophy expose the traps, science in 2025 is offering reversals, tools that flip despair into resilience, silence into freedom, collapse into rebirth. And that's where the game changes. Here's the raw hope buried under the wreckage. You are not condemned to waste your life. The science in 2025 is ruthless but clear. Change is possible and faster than most believe. Researchers at the University of Missouri published findings that simple practices of hope and resilience training slashed depression scores by nearly half within weeks. That's not abstract philosophy, that's measurable rewiring of the brain. Seligman's work on learned optimism shows the same. Shift how you explain your setbacks and you slash future regret by 40%. This is where Sartre collides with neuroscience. Sartre said we are condemned to be free, meaning you can't escape responsibility for choosing your life. Every excuse, every delay is still a choice. The new data only sharpens that knife. Your habits, your relationships, your rituals, they reshape your brain every day. Choose silence over scrolling and your focus returns. Choose movement over stagnation and your body thanks you with decades. Choose honesty with yourself and you escape Kierkegaard's despair. Nietzsche's voice roars here louder than ever, self-overcome. Don't aim to be happy, that's shallow. Aim to be strong, aim to create meaning where none existed. Because the moment you seize solitude, embrace discomfort and start living by your own code, you stop being a pawn of the herd and become a creator. A dangerous one. The cliffhanger? You now know the traps, you now know the reversals. But knowing is useless unless you rip the mask off right now and act. The final piece isn't theory, it's blood. It's choice. It's whether you'll walk out of this story and keep scrolling, or whether you'll torch the script that was written for you and carve one of your own. And that's where we end. Not with comfort, but with the most shocking call you'll ever hear. Here it is, the punch you've been dodging. If you don't seize your life now, someone else already has. The algorithms, the bosses, the crowds, they'll bleed you dry and thank you for the privilege. And you'll die polite, obedient, full of unrealized potential. Daniel Pink's survey of 26,000 regrets already told us the verdict. The number one regret of the dying isn't failure, it's cowardice. It's the relationships they didn't risk, the art they didn't make, the truths they didn't speak. That's the easy way to waste your whole life. Keep waiting for permission. But you don't need permission. You need defiance. You need to step into solitude, rip yourself from the noise, and admit the hardest truth. Nobody's coming to save you. That's terrifying. But it's also freedom. Because if no one is coming, then everything is on you, and that means everything is possible. Aristotle told us flourishing is the goal. Nietzsche demanded we create ourselves anew. Kierkegaard warned that despair comes from refusing to choose. Sartre slammed the gavel and said, you are free whether you like it or not. And science is catching up. Mindfulness, hope, resilience, solitude, they're not soft ideas, they're hard rewiring tools. In 2025, we know they work. They carve new neural pathways, they forge actual strength. So here's the dare. Walk away from the fake crowds, torch the fake success, mute the fake connections. Pick the terrifying path of solitude and authenticity. Write the book, start the work, risk the love, change the damn script. Because wasting your life is easy, but living it, that's rebellion. The only question is whether you'll waste it like most, or defy the herd and finally live.